Our theme this morning is going to be injustice. So to me, injustice goes farther than unfairness. Unfairness is annoying. It isn't fair, but it isn't fair to any of us. It's almost like a more cosmic level. Like unfairness is something that I was born this way, right? In this time, in this place, and someone else was born a different way, in a different time, and in a different place. Born to be a different type of person, and depending on those things, there can be a lot of unfairness involved, right? Like I was born poor, for example. Not rich, highly unfair, highly unfair. I was born with straight, flat hair when all I wanted was big, wonderful, curly hair, right? I can't do math to save my life. I don't care how many great teachers you give me, how much tutoring I do, how many books I've known. Nope, I cannot do math. That is brutally unfair, okay? Unfairness doesn't feel like someone did it to you as much, right? It feels more like that's just how it happened, how the cookie crumbled. It's the hand we're dealt, if it were, right? That's unfairness. As parents, business owners, people in any form of authority over anyone, and as Jesus followers, we would hope that we try our best to not be unfair, right? To use fair business practices, to teach each one of our children fairly, to try to be a fair person. And we're going to fail at this, but hopefully it's not intentional. Like the unfairness we bring to the world, hopefully, is an unintentional thing. Whereas injustice is something else entirely. To me, injustice says, I am doing you wrong, I know I am doing you wrong, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. Injustice is cruelty. I feel like we know what injustice looks like. In our westernized mindset, we see it very much in the courts. That's where justice is supposed to be. We try to get justice, and then the guilty walk away. And then we see when the innocent are condemned. There's injustice. But this morning, I want us to focus a little bit on what injustice feels like. Can we tap into our feelings a little bit? What does it feel like to be treated grossly unjust? One of my all-time favorite movies, and I'm going to apologize to the only two men in the room this morning real quick. It's a girly movie, and I fell in love with it my senior year of high school, so it's super girly. It's called Ever After. It's a Cinderella story, right? And if you know anything about my background with a stepmother and two half-sisters, the fairy tale runs a little close to home. You know what I'm saying? But this is Drew Barrymore, and she does this part beautifully. And if you know the story, the prince is going to have a ball to find a woman to marry because this is pre-Bumble and Tinder, right? And Cinderella is treated like a servant. And even though she's not one, she should be able to go to the ball, even though she's treated as a servant, right? So the stepmother, of course, tells her, you do all your chores, you find your own outfit to wear, you are going to get to go, never intending to let the Cinderella character actually go to the ball. And we never really know why, in any of the fairy tales, why the stepmother treats Cinderella in this fashion. We never get an understanding. And in fact, this is one of the only movies that tries to address it. The character actually asks the stepmother, why did you never love me? Why didn't you like me? And the answer is just disturbing. She tells the woman, why would anyone love a pebble in their shoe? That's what she called her. So injustice cuts deep when someone in power over you, that's a key term, power over you, simply doesn't like you for no good reason, okay? But in this version, the Cinderella character was very close to her father, loved him deeply. He would travel on trips. He would get books, bring back books to her. One of her favorite books was the last book he ever gave to her, a book called Utopia. She reads it. She loves it. It was her one connection to her father that was left, and the one connection to a life where she was loved that was left. She also had things left behind from her mother that had given to her, so of course she treasures that and wants her mother. But I want to play a scene from this movie, and I want you to see if you can pick up on the feelings. Pay attention to what Drew Barrymore as an actress is trying to express to us in this moment.
Mistress, you better get in here quick. Decided to grace us with her presence. What do you think you are doing? Trying on my dress. Do you honestly think that after that performance this morning, I'd let you go.
Do you honestly think these games, these intrigues are going to win you a crown? To hunt royalty like some sport? It's disgusting.
You're just jealous.
These are my mother's.
Yes, and she's dead.
I'm going to rip your hair out! Do something! Get away from me, so help me God! Marguerite, don't! Put it down! Give me the shoes! Put it down!
Consider carefully, Danielle. Your father's book or your mother's shoes? Though neither will save you from sound lashing.
So mean. So there is nothing she can do to stop what is happening to her. Like she tries to fight back, and it only gets worse. And what's being done to her is pointless beyond just an act of cruelty. No one is defending her. No one stepped in. No one stops what is happening. She can't stop it herself. She just has to take it. There's no frustration quite like the kind you feel. You can see her like stomp her foot in the moment an injustice is happening to you, and there is nothing you can do to make it stop. It's human to feel this way. It's human to respond this way. And what is Jesus in the book of Mark? Human. And what do we know? What happens to Jesus in all the gospel narratives? What happens to Jesus? That's kind of a key point of what we believe here, folks. What happens to Jesus in the gospels? He gets crucified, right? He's killed. He's put to death. There's this whole triumph on a donkey into Jerusalem, right? The Passover story, the Last Supper. There's the Garden of Gethsemane where Jesus prays. Then there's his arrest and his trial. And this morning, since we're talking injustice, I want us to focus on the moments of injustice that Jesus felt. I want us to look at his trial. Now remember, it's the Jewish religious leaders of the time who are anti-Jesus. Like they're the ones who took issue with Jesus, but they are under the tight Roman control and rule, right? So kind of like today, there's a secular government to decide things, and then there's the religious. But the Jewish people of the time were used to their laws also being like secular laws. They wanted their Mosaic law to be what people in the Jewish faith followed. However, they had to have Rome's permission. They couldn't just kill Jesus on their own because they believe he broke Mosaic law. They had to get Rome on board with that. All right, so we're going to read from Mark 14 this morning. We're going to start at 53 and go all the way to 65. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes were assembled. This is all the religious people right now. Jesus is in front of the religious people. Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself by the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. Some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands.' But even on this point, their testimony didn't agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, 'Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?' But he was silent, and he did not answer. Again, the high priest asked him, 'Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?' Jesus said, 'I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven.' Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, 'Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?' All of them condemned him as deserving death. Some began to spit on him, to blindfold him, and to strike him, saying to him, "Prophesy." The guards also took him and beat him. The religious leaders do not like Jesus. Talk about not being liked for no good reason. They are bringing Jesus to trial, a life and death trial, to be clear, and they are lying about him. Absolutely lying. So imagine the absolute frustration of standing there while those with the highest calling of righteousness, the most godly people who are supposed to uphold God's mercy and justice, and they lie about you to your face. Injustice cuts really deep with those who are supposed to protect you. The ones that are supposed to protect you are the very ones trying to cause you the greatest harm. Cinderella's stepmother should have protected her. I feel like it's such a sacred calling to care for a child that is not biologically yours. That can be so beautiful and so healing and even be holy. Yet the one that was supposed to love and care for her was the meanest to her. Jesus is the Son of God, and those who claim to follow God the most are the ones who want to see Jesus destroyed. We cannot sleep on religious injustice, y'all. The atheists aren't wrong when they tell us that a lot has been done in God's name horribly. A lot of horrible things have happened. Yes, there's been a lot of good. When I think of the good religion has done, when I think of good of Christianity has been done, we have to think of the amount of taking care of the poor, the amount of hospitals that were started, the amount of caring after those grieving and the wounded. But we also have to think of the Crusades and the justification of slavery and the millions of kids that get abused and molested and hurt and wounded. The nuns in Ireland and the adoptions that happened, right? We know the stories. It just hits different, right? You, me, we expect bad people to do bad things. When we're robbed at 1 a.m. next to our car that's parked in a dark spot by a repeat offender, it kind of, yeah, that makes sense, right? When we are abused, killed, harmed by those who claim to be good and who convinced us that they were good, even better than we are. We all do it. We end up comparing our godliness to other people, especially people who work at a church or are celebrity-type pastors. We look at a Beth Moore type person and we think I'm not that holy. I'm not that good, right? We'll never be like them. And then we get smacked in the face by something they did or said. Not Beth Moore. She didn't smack anybody. But the rest of them, right? A kid is abused by them, right? I don't know if you remember massage therapists coming out by the dozens over a very specific scholar that was reporting all kinds of abuse and stuff. And there was the one guy whose congregation reported all the money that was stolen from the church so they could buy his book and make it a bestseller, to inflate it. We do a double take. It hits different. You're like, what the? So these are God's chosen people in this instance. It's God's chosen people, his chosen religious people going after God's chosen son. And here in verse 57, it says, some stood up and gave false testimony, and their testimony did not agree. They lied about him. Injustice cuts deep when people intentionally lie about who you are and what you've done. Has anyone ever lied about you? On purpose? Deliberately smear your name? I'm not talking about misunderstandings. I'm not talking about the ex that has a different understanding of how that whole relationship went down and says some things about you. We kind of, in some ways, things get muddy over there. But I'm just talking about bold-faced, wow, and I know that that's not, and you're going with that? Okay. That's frustrating. That's the kind of frustrating that I feel like women hate when you're in an argument and you're in an important meeting and you just know and you just feel it happening, and in your brain you're just going, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, right? Don't cry. And then you're so mad and you're so frustrated, and the next thing you know, you're overwhelmed and you start freaking crying. Someone lying about you triggers that like nothing else. And Jesus stands there and takes it. I wonder if he was saying, don't cry, don't cry. And as I'm prepping and I'm praying this week, my main question was, why? Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you defend yourself? He actually said very little. He says, you say that I am, And we have other versions, even in Matthew and Luke, that he says that you say I am. And he later does go on to talk about the Son of Man being seated at the right hand of power. So he does have that piece, but that's it. And then the religious leaders are going to take Jesus to Pilate. He's the Roman in charge, the governor at the time. The religious leaders, right, can't just kill a man under Roman law, so they're going to take him to Pilate to see if the Romans can do anything with him. So we're going to pick up in chapter 15, verse 1, going to go through 5. As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered him, "You say so." Then the chief priests accused him of many things. Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you?" But Jesus made no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed. The chief priests continued to accuse him of many things, and we know from Matthew and Luke that the things he accused him of was mostly sedition, right? Trying to cause up, overthrow the Roman government, right? Like that's what they're saying. Like, look, Rome, you got to pay attention to because he's going to be a problem. He's saying he's the king over even your king, right? And scholars say that the "you say I am," when he says that, "you say I am," it's not a denial. It's more of an affirmation. Like it's an affirmation, but it's not what you think it is what he's trying to say. So say, for example, like people come up to me and Nathan and they're like, "Heather, Nathan, you guys are pastors, right?" And I can guarantee both of us are like, "Yes, but maybe not like you think it is," right? Depending on your background and knowledge of churches, right? You can assume a pastor has anything from like a cloth and a collar to oil and casting out the demons, right? And we're not knocking any of those. But as we are pastors, I would say yes, but maybe not in the way you think. Like maybe not that kind, right? So Jesus is saying, you say I am the Messiah, but I'm probably not the Messiah the way you think it is, but that doesn't make me any less the Messiah, okay? So Jesus is facing a serious level of injustice, yet he says next to nothing. He doesn't defend himself. He doesn't offer a speech. Like if you think about it, he spends so much of his ministry speaking and talking and teaching, and here he is on the greatest stage ever with everyone's attention, and he says nothing? Why? I think we all have our opinions on Jesus' motivations, the opinions on things that we don't get the straight-up answers for. Scholars have theirs. A lot of them will call it stoicism, his heroic bravery. I don't know. I just go to Sunset Cliffs where I pray every week, and I just started asking Jesus, why didn't you speak for yourself, Lord? Like, what was up with that? Why weren't you talking? And the answer I got, like just maybe my spirit, give or take, whether it's scholarly applicable or not, just it wouldn't have done any good. When Jesus speaks, things happen. People change. They are drawn to him. Words matter, and with Jesus, his words matter more than anyone else's. And so scholars argue that Jesus not speaking is a part of his divine submission, right? So Jesus is submitting to his destiny. God sent him to die, and this is Jesus doing it. I disagree. I disagree wholeheartedly that the whole thought that God sent Jesus to die. That is not my theology. I think God sent his son to save the world, and the men of the world put him to death. God has ultimate control and power, so he brought his son back to life and set out saving the world that way. But God, to me, God doesn't destine evil. He doesn't destine evil. And make no mistakes, injustice is evil, and killing a man without cause is kind of the definition of an unjust act. Thus, also, it's evil. So what then? What is happening here? What if Jesus isn't submitting to God's will that he die, because maybe that wasn't God's will in the first place, his will was for him to live and save the world, what was he doing? I think Jesus is submitting to humanity's free will. God has never once in Scripture taken away free will. He has strongly encouraged his will in several instances. He has dropped some people dead, right? He has caused massive problems to get people to do what he wanted, but humanity has always had a choice. That's the whole point of the Garden of Eden story. We get to choose. We get to choose how we live and what we do and who we serve. God will not step in on someone else's choices. Just look at Scripture. Did God free the slaves from Egypt? No. He sent Moses and a ton of issues to get the evil man to let them go? Did God stop Israel from electing a king when he didn't want it? No, he didn't force it. In fact, he worked within the system that humanity set up, right? Did he force Joseph to stay with a pregnant Mary? No, he came to him in a dream and asked him to stay with her. Told him it would be a good idea, but it was still Joseph's choice. And for that matter, even the pregnancy, Mary had a choice. Like she gave her consent to that. So when Jesus arrives on earth, he doesn't force people to change. He doesn't force people to be different. He asks them to. He asked Zacchaeus, the rich man, Zacchaeus, the rich short man, to make right what had been wrong. He asked Martha to notice Mary sitting at his feet and learning what is right. In fact, the only time we see Jesus exercise his God authority is with things of the earth and things of evil, right? He turns water into wine. He doesn't change people's perception or their idea of what happens and what type of person it is when you have a party and you run out of wine. He heals people. He doesn't magically give the doctors of the day an understanding of disease and medicine that they would need. He casts out demons. He's here to battle the actual evil on our behalf. He doesn't cast out the Roman Empire, which was super corrupt and evil, but they are people, not demons. When Jesus captured and Peter cuts off the soldier's ear, if y'all remember that story, he doesn't forcefully stop Peter's actions, not even physically. He asks Peter to lay down the sword, and then he heals the ear. What if God only intervenes when evil is in play, but asks us to intervene when humans are in play? God lets humans be human, be free. And he asks us to be the one to step in when humans have overstepped. Many of you guys know I sued for custody of my younger sisters when I was in college. I was a senior in college. I won. They were placed in a girls' home. They both had college degrees. Yay! Lots of amazing redemptive story. But you know what I did do first, because we come from such a messed up environment and my sisters were stuck there, is I begged God for years to fix it. Years, crying on my face to save my sisters, to get my stepmother to put my sisters in school, to make my father stop drinking. Did God do any of that? No. My dad is going to die yellow because he drinks so much, right? That liver is shot. There has been no change there, no matter how many times I've prayed for 40 years. Last straw, I'm a junior in college, and I'm praying to God to do something for my sisters. I was going to lose them. I was screaming at the top of my lungs in my car, do something, do something. And you know what he said? Why don't you do something? Oh, wait, you mean I have the power to do something? And with God's guidance, I absolutely did. God didn't save my sisters. I did. And I want to be careful with that statement because, yes, God was with me every step of the way. But God used me to do the miracle. He didn't wave his hand and convince my father to suddenly be a better dad. He didn't wave his hand over my stepmother and suddenly convince her she had to put her children first. No, God has never done that. He didn't do it for himself. Jesus is standing there. Lies are being told. His life is on the line. Godly people hating him for no other reason than the influence he has over the people of the day, and he stays quiet. You think maybe if Jesus had said something, it would have broken the sacred rule of humans' free will. Maybe Jesus stayed quiet because he gets us. He gets that frustration, and he had the freaking power to break every promise God had made to humanity by saying, kill off this entire evil, awful, power-hungry generation. Maybe he was quiet because it was just as awful for him to stand there and take it as it would be for one of us. And anything he would have said in that moment of that horror and that frustration would have broken what God was doing on earth. And maybe he loves us enough to let us be human. He loves us enough to let us choose, always let us choose, to be as free, to be as good, or as evil as we want to be. And because he knows so many are going to choose evil, he's just trying to find some people who will pick the good, who will put others on equal standing as themselves, who would lay down their lives for their friends. What if God can't stop bad people from doing bad things because that would make him a bad God? What if that's why he's called you by name instead? If that's why he called me by my name instead? And what if you're one of those people that the bad thing happened to you? You're not watching injustice. You're experiencing injustice. I feel like two things. One, tell someone. 100% tell someone who will fight on your behalf. Injustice is evil people going against you. Justice is having someone else fight to defend you. Justice is not having to fight that battle on your own. Justice is having authorities, people, others who say, that's wrong, we're going to stop it, and we're going to fix it. That's what justice feels like. Number two, we all have to remember Jesus doesn't waste a hurt. His deepest hurt, the injustice, facing a punishment to death for something he did not do, did not go wasted. We are still talking about Jesus to this day, right? His name has survived centuries, and it's going to survive centuries after us. He won't waste a hurt. He won't waste the injustice that was done to you. Now, it could be a journey. It could be a long one. And just like with Jesus, the evil people, the religious people, Pilate, all of them, they did not get the final say. And I believe the evil people in our lives, God will not let the evil people in our own life have final say either. Would you guys pray with me? So Jesus, we just thank you for taking that injustice so that we can choose, so that you allow us to be free, the best kind of freedom, the freedom to be who we are. And Lord, as we are frustrated and angry and in pain over the injustice of this world, over the injustice of even a 14-year-old with a gun, and just the irritation of God, why don't you do something? Lord, I ask that you hold us as we grieve. I ask that you remind us that you know exactly what that feels like, that you've been there, that you're not a God who doesn't get it, who hasn't stood in that spot of frustration, of injustice himself. But Lord, where you have given us gifts, where you have given us talent, where you have given us goodness and mercy, where you have given us compassion, show us how to be the justice. Show us how to get off our knees and walk out the door because you've called us into that. Show us how to be you on this earth instead of us just expecting you to fix this earth. Lord, you are so good. Help us feel your love this morning, and your mercy and your goodness. We ask all this in your name. Amen.